If you're a B2B business, a B2B tech company, or a B2B marketer, you're in the right place. Coming to you from Studio 26, this is the Interesting B2B Marketers Podcast, bringing you interesting contemporary takes, industry tips, guest interviews, and true stories from B2B marketers in the trenches. Now, here's your host, Steve Goldhaber.
All right, welcome everyone back to Studio 26. Today I am joined with Uber marketer Steve Lafontaine, and by Uber marketer, that is not in the brand name, that is just in the generic description.
No. I'm a user of Uber, but I do not work for them, no.
Yeah. And today's episode is going to be changed to Interesting B2B Marketers called Steve. So we're just gonna chat with each other, and after the show, then we'll rebrand to the normal one. So anyway, Steve, thank you. Thanks for joining the show today. Excited to have you on and talk marketing.
Yeah. Always a pleasure to talk to you, Steve.
All right. So like we do, we open up with some case studies or some stories. Tell us about the first story that you want to share with us.
Sure. So I worked recently in the last few years, I worked for a B2G company. So we were marketing to government, non-federal. So it was all state, cities, counties. We worked in a fairly nuanced market within government as a software company. Our focus was on FOIA law, Freedom of Information Act, so public records requests, that sort of thing. Our software helped not only with the front end sort of requester side of things, but also, the meat of the tool was really in the back end and how our customers processed and intake those requests and then gather all that information from all these different departments and people. And there's a payment side of it and all these things. But I came on as the first marketing hire. And within the first year or two, one of the big first initiatives I enacted was around content marketing, and namely using the data that we had as an organization as a way to drive authority. So I think a lot of times organizations position their authority based on information that anybody could figure out by doing some Googling, right? I think when content becomes truly powerful is that when you as an organization are uniquely positioned to offer content based on data that only you have, right? So as a market leader in this space, we were able to build an index that quantified the growth and change and sort of growing complexity within that specific sort of niche space. And for you content marketers out of there, like that type of like big, juicy content piece with a lot of different legs and a lot of different data and a lot of different offshoots is just gold, because you can take a single piece like that. Maybe you rerun the data every quarter, depending on what it is, but you can take that and you can really recycle it in all these different ways. And so we were able to, in our little sort of corner of the SaaS government world, we were able to really build a name for ourselves through this index, and we had interviews with AP reporters, and we got a lot of coverage in government technology specific publications and that sort of thing. And for me, it's just a story of like, as a marketer, as a B2B marketer, as a content leader, right? Like taking those assets that are uniquely yours and figuring out a way to use those in ways that nobody else can because they don't have access to that information.
Yeah, that is such a rich area. I love when marketers go this path. It's either the original research or the original data. And all of a sudden it just gets you into an arena of credibility because the people who are reading your content truly don't know it yet. Like there's so many times we just write posts that are topics that have been recycled, but that original data or research is so fun.
And it becomes a fun foundation because you can, not only do you have that piece, but you can add layers onto that. So you made a comment about survey data, right? As a market leader in the space we were in, we also had this gigantic customer pool, right? So we were also able to survey our customers, and now you can start to add more color, sort of qualitative information and sort of layers on top of that core data set to put some narrative around it. So it's not just, yes, it's getting more and more difficult for you as a city or a county to process public records requests, but here's what your peers are saying, here's what how they're addressing some of these issues. Here's some unique testimony from them on, how lonely it is and how they feel misunderstood within the, right? Like all these sort of like, therapeutic things for people that work in this space. And you as a marketer get to be the steward of that, right? Which is, I mean, that's why I do this stuff. It's so fun to just like help people in these very genuine ways. And, oh, by the way, be supporting the business that you're representing and that you're helping build,
Yeah. So there's a moment of truth in this type of a marketing play here is I've got clients I've worked with who are randomly in both camps. Like we've got this amazing data. We'll never share it because it's all the secret sauce. And you obviously were able to overcome that. Was there much pushback in publishing the index?
Interestingly, the pushback was more, there were sort of two sort of internal friction points, I guess. One was, how concerned are our customers going to be with us sharing this data, which led to us being very overt, and sort of part of the elevator speech on this thing from the beginning was anonymized data, right? Like there's no individual account data. These are all generalized, sort of thrown into the bucket and spit back out as information things, right? So you weren't sharing any individual data. That was really the biggest sort of friction point or pushback that we got as we were sort of concepting the idea. Sorry, your other question about what other sort of pushback we might have gotten in it. I lost it.
Yeah, no, it has to do with a lot of companies who have this data. The last thing they would do is publish it, even though they can anonymize it. And sometimes it's just, that's gold, right? And I think some people just get too nervous and they're like too sensitive, or sometimes the industry that they're in is too sensitive to even play that game, to be like, well, no, we're in this security business. Like we would never dare create an index of anonymized information. It would just be too bizarre. But yeah, I think the people who do overcome that in a way that obviously is sensitive to the client data.
I think that comes back to being just the start, middle, and end of your business model being a servant to your customers and future customers, right? Like this information is too valuable to not put out there. If our competitors want to use this information to help, establish their product goals or set their value prop in the market, like by all means, come and get it, right? Like for us, it was very much we want to position ourselves as a market leader. We have this information in front of us that will allow us to sort of stand in that position. And if our competitors want to use that, so be it. We had competitors we would catch on occasion referencing that index, not realizing that it had come from us, right?
That's
like, and
amazing.
The kind of like gold that's like, we can all dream of.
Yeah. So walk us through, as you start to publish this index, what happens? What are maybe some surprises, or, tell us what goes on.
I would say one of the things that surprised me, like it seemed, without going into it, because I wouldn't be able to if you asked me to, but like the math of what we were creating at the outset felt like it would be very simple, right? Like we sort of throw all this in, divide by the number of things we threw in and output. But it became a labor, and it became a lot more, it became a much longer process than I expected it to. And if I could go back and do it again, I would either find an internal resource that was a hobbyist data analyst, right? Or I would find an external resource and pay them to help with that sort of number side of things. Because when you're creating something like an index, and there are any number of companies you could name that do hiring indices and state of the union type things, you're sort of trying to emulate what they're doing without having a full understanding, or what it's its own thing, but you're trying to lead to a single number, and then you're trying to have these supportive numbers that dive deeper into it. And it got far more complex than I think any of us expected it to the point where, in year 2 and year 3, we would be adapting things, and it's, you're trying to remain consistent because the value of it is in its longevity and sort of the tracking over time. So you can't change it too much either. So you've got to sort of establish the way it's going to be out of the gate. Yep. Knowing that you're trying to track it and sort of report on it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. It's, the thing as a marketer, I was going to say, a lot of marketing campaigns live for a year, for 2 years. But when you do these indexes, it's strange because you're like, this could be going on for 10, 15 years, like the Edelman Trust Barometer still lives today. And that was just a small idea that's like, maybe we should do this every year, so it is interesting how you have to think that part through.
Yeah, the challenge in that can be, and we ran into this, is when nothing changes, right? So we had this trajectory, yeah. Right, and we were reporting on it quarterly. Which in hindsight we decided, okay, we only need to do this once a year, maybe twice a year, because, yep, it's still getting harder to manage this, right? There's no news to it, right? So it's like, how do you take that sort of initial launch, and we did a nice job of sort of exposing the data to the media outlets that we partnered with, so that they could actually take it and display it in their own way. So we actually ended up with a lot of free work and media outlets sort of displaying the data in these kind of interesting ways that we hadn't thought about, which was really powerful. But then after that initial launch, the next quarter you're coming out with the data and it's like, yep, things ticked up this much, right? So trying to find news in that was challenging for us. So, we moved to more of a calendar based method, right? Where it's like, okay, this month we're really going to focus on this aspect. Next month we're going to focus on this aspect, right? And so you start to dice and divide things a bit to make it more interesting and to give you more to talk about that is still of value and is still interesting.
Yeah. One thing I've seen, it's rare that companies do this, but I've seen it a couple times where they actually will publish the index that, like, here's our narrative on what this means. Here's, it's all the normal thought leadership stuff. But then they actually link to the data set in a database, or sometimes is like, hey, here's the Google Sheets or the Excel document. And I love to see that, because it's kind of like it's a company truly embracing content marketing of giving and just saying, you've seen our take on it, but here's the actual data. You manipulate the data and do what you want with it. I've always been fascinated with that level of maturity of a marketing organization, is just to release it.
Yeah, it's the hyper version of your question earlier about, internal struggles with, how comfortable are we with releasing this data and sort of letting it be known. Like, that's pouring gas on that and saying, you know what, here's our interpretation of this data. Like, here, tell us what you think. And I think that takes a very mature organization in probably a mature market, right? That sort of has an understanding and has interest, right? Like you could put that out there and nobody accesses it because nobody gives a hoot, right? Yeah, that's really interesting. I always love that when I see links to things and it's like the actual Google Doc or the actual Word document spreadsheet of the data. It's like, oh my gosh, this is gold mine,
I've seen, an example of that. This isn't really in the B2B space, but City of New York published cab data. I think cabs have to report this data back, and someone went in and analyzed it and was like, here are the 10 corners that if I hang out near, they're the most rides. So then it was all this intel on where do you want to go as a cab driver that doesn't have a long line? It's not the predictable hotel line. It's these random corners that you're going to get good fares on quickly.
Yeah, I love that. And it always makes me think because I enjoyed that project and we found a lot of success in it. In future roles, that's always going to sort of be top of mind for me, right? How at this organization, how I'm supporting this client, can I execute something like that? And I imagine there are organizations out there that are saying, well, I don't have that type of data, right? Or, they work in a product space that just doesn't allow that. You mentioned earlier, customer survey data, right? Like running a quarterly survey of, 50 of your customers. And it doesn't necessarily have to be just, here's our 10 questions, but creating some consistency in conversation so that you can start to identify some level of trends and what's changing. There's plenty of organizations and, professional associations and things like that do that sort of thing. Working in government, there's an organization called NASIO, National Association of Informational Officers, but every year they put out their top 10 state CIO priorities, right? And everybody always watches for that because, cybersecurity's gone down 3 levels this year, right? And everybody gets to overanalyze what that means and dive into the data on why that is. But that's data based on survey and conversation, right? Not based on product usage or some other sort of hard data, I guess you could say, which is, another interesting angle to take it, I guess.
Yeah. The other thing too, I've seen companies take this in almost as a prospecting tool. So let's say you're going after your CIOs, right? And you want to try to have conversations with 10 of them. And that becomes your introduction. Hey, my company is doing research just for CIOs. Here's the specific topic. Obviously you've got to respect this is the no sell zone when you get this meeting, but it's a 10-minute research survey or whatever the collection tool is, where that's now a brand experience thing. So for 10 minutes, someone at least got to know your company.
Yeah.
So you can work on both the client side and the prospect side.
Yeah. We always had dreams of turning the index into something that somebody could work through some system or some set of questions, right? Or some tool where they could input their own information and then compare themselves to their peers, right? And you can imagine how valuable that would be as a lead generation tool, as a, you could do a podcast conversation with somebody where you actually go through that process and compare them to the index. As a seller, right, you're not asking for time to do a product demonstration. You're asking time to walk through how you compare to your peers of similar size and scale. You can just imagine how powerful that becomes in a consultative sales motion, right? Because to your point, no sell zone. I'm just here to help you. I'm here to show you what's going on in this space and sort of explain to you how smart I am in this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, I've heard of people doing a kind of a related application of that, and the example is, we've identified you as someone who we think is a best client because you meet these 10 criteria, whether it's like their size, the industry, the software stack they use, and the conversation is almost like, if you just tell us these 10 things, then that actually, you're going to have a lot of success with our tool or platform because it's geared for you. And it just becomes, it's like a game show. It's kind of like, ooh, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Am I going to be a good fit or not?
Yeah. Well, in government as a public organization, and this is the space we were representing, a lot of the information that feeds into that is public record, right? So you as a seller, if you want to take an account-based approach to your market and your sort of sales motion, go find your 20 biggest fish and go do that work, right? Fill that out for them. And then you can go to them and say hey, look, we have this industry leading index, it shows the growing complexity of this, that, and the other thing. I did some analysis on your own organization. It's like the sellers that will reach out with a screenshot of your homepage, right? With 5 bullets of all the ways that your SEO is being destroyed because you don't have your XYZ schema set up in the right, you know what I mean? That type of but those are the things that as a buyer sort of raise your eyebrows, because it's oh, there's value here, right? Outside of just the software, there's an expertise potentially with this organization that's going to make me better, smarter, more efficient, whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's marketing as a service as opposed to just a communication vehicle. It reminds me of also Neil Patel, the digital marketing guru. We should invite Neil on the show one day, see what he has to say.
Right.
But, he had a sales strategy, which was target private equity or venture capital backed companies who owned, a portfolio of 5, 10, 20 companies. He would do all the SEO analysis to say, here are the 10 things that are broken about your website. He would solve it for them. So here's the 5, 10 page proposal I'm just giving this away, right? He then would wait for the parent company to forward it to the CEO of the business and say, hey, Neil sent me this. Sounds like he knows what's going on. Can you address this? And then the CEO would kind of be well, now I have to do something, because he would essentially just use it as a sales tool where he gave away his thinking. And then the CEO, I mean, not a lot of CEOs of businesses are at that SEO guru level. And he's like, well, you seem to know what you're doing. And so again, marketing as a service, if you can do it, is a very powerful approach.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even internal marketing teams and B2B organizations there's a perfect example of the programs that don't work are the ones where marketing is off doing their own thing, right? I know it's cliche to say these days, but that partnership where sales is involved and they're executing against and feeding and helping support and drive the thing that marketing is doing, that's gold, right? It's not marketing going off and creating this blog and you hand it off to the sellers who might include it in their signature for a couple of weeks, right? It's like, how do you actually get them included in it so that they have some ownership in it? We had our standard sort of disco meeting, like pitch deck had a slide or two on our index, right? Like the sellers were trained up. They understood the content, A, because it made them smarter about the space, but B, because it gave them sort of an asset to go into market with and another excuse to call on prospects. That type of thing is, and that is, I love that example from Neil, because the sales calls that I accept, right? So working at a software company, I'm prospected often, right? The ones that always raise my eyes are the ones that I always have to respond to, are the ones where it's your CEO saying, "Hey, this looked interesting." So it's like, okay, I can't instant delete that, right? I have to at least go to the website and give my boss a reason why I didn't call this guy back. Yeah. But if that seller did a good job, right, then I am picking up the phone, and I've bought software that way, right? Because somebody sort of found the right way to. SEO is a great example of that, because every CEO knows they should be doing it well. Many of them don't know exactly what that means or how to go about doing it well. So if you've got somebody coming in and say, "Hey, you're not doing it well," right? I had a founder I worked with who was always, whenever our competition ranked above us, just fired him up, right? Like, how much money do I have to spend where to make sure that I'm not being outranked by, these guys nipping at our heels, and it was always, you roll your eyes a little bit, but that becomes important. And that's, anyways. I digress.
I love it. I feel like this is its own podcast. I feel like we're also upsetting a lot of the B2B marketers listening right now, because they're like, "Oh my God, my marketing sucks. I need to create my own index or my own proprietary data set." It's just a rich area to be in.
Yeah. And I think it doesn't have to, it's not, I think the lesson here, the idea here is that creating, I forgot who does the hub and spoke thing. There's companies that talk about sort of hub and spoke type approach to content. You probably do yourself, right? But like, the meatier that hub can be, right? Like that core thing, in my experience, the meatiest core thing you can create is something based on reality. And again, something based on data or information that only you as a business have. The easier your job is going to be in sort of recycling and reusing and turning that into a webinar and a gated video here and that kind of thing. Like, so, spend your sweat equity, take an extra week on your brainstorming to think about that core thing that you're sort of centering your activation around.
Yeah.
It's so much easier than doing, machine gun marketing where you're doing 30 different things of seemingly unrelated value or sort of core message versus creating that one thing and sort of spinning out of that what you're doing, It's a much better use of resources, that's for sure.
And please, you have to assure me that there wasn't a senior data scientist who got paid $800,000 a year to create the index. It sounds like it was very much like a grassroots thing.
Yeah. We had somebody in our technology group that had built, I'm going to butcher this, so I apologize, but a SQL workflow, something, right? Some script that he could run that would export that data. And then he was able to translate it into a spreadsheet that my team and I would sort of use on a quarterly basis and drop. I mean, it was literally just spreadsheet stuff, right? The hard part and the big effort was on the upfront and sort of coming to agreement on what it was. And you get very good at the elevator speech on how the data was calculated and how it came to be, right? Because as we all know as B2B marketers, like, when you have an idea or you have a program, you end up pitching it to 20 different people, 20 different times, So that was a big part of it too, is really making it a simple message and being able to speak to it in really clear ways,
Yeah. Awesome. Great story. That was a really good one. Is there another story out there, or are we going to jump into the get to know you part?
How about some attribution conversation? So this is also, and we can decide this isn't exciting enough, but
only to the people who care about how their businesses are run is attribution important.
We realized that we were, and this is also, I was still in the B2B space, B2G space. We realized that we were sort of in that random active marketing mode where we had anecdotal evidence and understanding of what was and wasn't working, but we didn't have a good way of actually tying that to dollars. So we had newly launched new CMS platform, some marketing automation. So we knew that we needed to tie everything we were doing into that CMS, so that all of our contacts were enrolled and tied into an object that allowed us to track it down the road. What we didn't have in place is how those engagements actually tied to dollars. And there are any number of software solutions you can go to now that will do that attribution for you. But it's really expensive. So we actually found a piece of software, a gentleman that created a piece of software that had a very simple model within this CMS, popular CMS in the market, that for low annual cost would allow us to very simply say, in a linear attribution model, and we could do some U-shaped stuff and some more sort of complex things, but we just did a first touch is the same value as last touch. A person who engages in these 3 programs or campaigns ultimately ties into this amount of money. Take that total amount of money and split it, divide it by 3 and assign it to that campaign. So like just this very simple, like dollars to campaigns and programs method that allowed us to actually start saying, you know what, the webinars that we're doing with these 3 associations sure do seem to lead to higher value opportunities, right? So maybe we should be doing more with those organizations. Or, when we go to these trade shows, the leads we generate off of those end up being a much lower ASP than the folks that come to us through our website and have already done their research on the upfront. So I think the story there and the lesson there is that you don't need to spend out of the gate, and it depends on the maturity of your business and where you are in your growth, but you don't need to spend $100,000 on an attribution model when there are tools out there that allow you to do some very basic linear touch attribution to start to learn exactly what is and isn't working. And then you can start getting fancier with, is first touch more value? Is last touch more value? Do you want to go, U-shaped or all the different shapes, right, that you can do for how you attribute to that? But that was a big learning curve for us at that organization, because again, historically, we tied dollars to, the demo came through the website without thinking about, oh, that person had sat on a webinar a few weeks beforehand, or that person had received a call from one of our SDR reps back in July or June or whatever the month is. So, not a super interesting story. I think the lesson there again, though, is you don't need to over-engineer some of these things out of the gate, right? But you need to do something to start learning exactly what is and isn't working.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating how many organizations just look at the front end of marketing. So if you're buying media, impressions, the cost of the media, the click-through rate, all that stuff. I was in I remember doing a financial service ad buy for someone, and the client was just obsessed with media efficiency. It was all about, if there's 15 properties, these 8 were way too expensive. We would never want to spend money on these really expensive properties. Once we got the attribution connected to, in this case, it was deposits of dollars, all the front end media metrics went away, because what we learned was the most expensive 2 or 3 websites that we were advertising on were generating the most in deposits per click or deposits per new account. It just was an eye-opening moment, because we switched into thinking more of kind of like CFOs, right? It's not about the cost, it's about the return. And without that attribution, this brand would have gone on forever and just buying cheap media. And it was no fault to the media folks, right? The media folks were always trained on efficiency and value, and these 4 sites are the highest CPMs. Why? This is crazy, And it's like, of course, it doesn't matter if it's working, and without that attribution, you don't know.
Yeah. I found the most frustrating thing I found in that was it forces you, and sometimes this can be a bad thing, it forces you to disallow prospect or customer interaction in a way you can't track, right? As a marketer, I would, as a user, as a customer-centric marketer, I want somebody to be able to watch this piece of content without having to give me their email address, right? I want to do that. But the side of me that has accountability to the dollars I'm spending says, well, you got to gate that, right? If you're not getting an email address, then you're not attributing the ultimate dollars. And that's always a struggle. And I know there's not a clean answer to it. I'd actually be really interested in how you consult folks on that, because it can be really challenging. How do you take the user's best interest and marry that with your need to prove out the dollars you're spending and sort of learn from that. It's hard.
That's a tough one. I call that the to gate or not gate question. And the way I talk to my clients about it is, it's not an all or nothing answer. You shouldn't be no, we gate all the content. I think you have to pick. If you have 8 amazing pieces of content, gate half and don't gate the others. So you kind of have to hedge on it. And I think ultimately, if you're doing it the right way with a strong CRM platform, it's just asking the customer one time, right? So give us your email one time. Anytime they come back to the website, providing that they haven't deleted cookies, like, they should know that. Or if you're pushing the content out through email and they're engaging on that email, you should know. So it is a tough question, but I think it's also a good challenge to marketers, because if you do gate something and you believe in it, that ups the game of your content, meaning it's got to be so incredibly good that you have no qualms about saying, no, that we're going to gate this. And it's so good that people are going to ask for it. I think the challenge is sometimes, well, this isn't really a great piece of content and we're going to gate it. It's like,
well, that's where you get into trust issues, right? Like you, if I'm going to give my email to this company, I have to trust that I'm not now going to get bombarded with unsolicited emails and calls, right? Like, as a marketer, you have to be responsible with that information and a responsible sort of steward of that data, which again, I'm sure is obvious to most of the folks listening here, but it's like, it's really important. Like, the content has to be super high value. If it's not, give it away for free. If somebody does give you their email or their phone number, you can't instantly hand that off to your SDR partners and tell them to go hammer this person for the next 4 months, right? Because you've lost them, right? Like, that's not what they were asking for. You know, I'm dealing with some family stuff, and I reached out to an organization that's supposed to help you find healthcare providers. You know, and I thought it was sort of trusting these people with, hey, I'm in this very sensitive situation, right? Can you help me with this? And all they did was post my information to this marketplace. And now I'm getting hammered from all these, right? Like, we've all dealt with these types of situations, like maddening. Yeah. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm never going to refer anybody to your business. You've been completely unhelpful. I trusted you with this sensitive information with my own personal, right? It's like, as a marketer, I learned from those experiences, right? Because I know that that's a level of trust to give somebody your email, and you have to be responsible with that, you know?
Yeah. Anytime the phone number, I feel like the phone number is a moment of trust, whereas a consumer or someone who's buying a service, and I'll admit this, you're either going to get my right phone number or I'm going to accidentally miss one number on that phone number. And I'm just going to submit the phone number because I want the content. Right. That would be interesting to see, is like, can you track the number of good phone numbers submitted versus non-good? And like, that would be a great model exercise to be like, yeah, if someone submits a fake number, like, it's not a good fit.
Right.
But I always think to me, that's the boldest one. I don't mind email. It's I will be calling you for this piece of content.
Yeah. The phone number is definitely, and especially now that so many of us work from home. I mean, I don't even know where my office phone is anymore. Right. It's either, chat, email, maybe a few special folks have my cell phone number. Right.
All right. Well, I like that story. Attribution's cool. Thank you for sharing that. We're now jumping into the softer side of the podcast. This is the get to know Steve. Sure. And we're going to figure out, when did you decide to kind of become a marketer, going back in time? Was there a moment? Was there some event where you're like, I love doing marketing?
Yeah. I took a graphic design class in high school, and I've always been I'm a hobbyist woodworker, and I enjoy making things and creating things. And I think that itch was scratched a bit in high school when I took a graphic design class. So I actually went to school. I went to Bradley University in Peoria, go Braves. And I started as a fine arts major, thinking I was going to be a graphic designer. I am not a drawer. I'm not a painter. So I had a rough first semester, and communications and their advertising program, marketing program was sort of the default, right? I sort of fell into that, but it allowed me, and again, I know it's a little cliche as a marketer, but it allowed me that like creative outlet, but also to learn the business side, right? And sort of how to support a business. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed being in a profession where I could sort of support artists and work with artists and sort of have that creative sort of thing in my professional life, and also make money and support myself and eventually my family in that. So haven't turned back since high school, I guess, but certainly since college.
It's just the only thing that's changed is marketing has been called 18 different things since you started. So, but it is all the same thing. I had a LinkedIn post I created basically saying like, my God, I've been in marketing for 25 years now. And like, has anything really changed? Like, of course, the technology and data and all these things have changed. But when you break it down to the essence, it really is still the basics of, I want to communicate. I want to sell. I want to persuade. Those fundamental things are all the same.
Yeah, I think the transition in my career where things became different. My family and I live outside of Chicago, and we moved up to Madison, Wisconsin for a while, and I worked for a regional bank up there. And that was 8 years ago, something like that. But that was my first exposure to the sort of B2B world. And I fell in love with the richness of those relationships. Like it just, I've worked in spirits and beer and pharma and a number of different sort of consumer industries. And it always felt like we were just trying to be the loudest one shouting from the highest tower, the thing that was the most eye-catching. And now that I've shifted into this world where I'm actually trying to help people in a very genuine way in support of a business, but in a genuine way, like, I don't know that I can ever go back. Like having that's the thing I enjoy about my job is helping people. And my job allows me to do that. So the index we talked about earlier, if it's, the content you're putting out or the programs you're executing, like they're not just, how can I shout about my product from the tallest mountain? It's how can I bring some value to this person to prove that we know what we're talking about and we're, a trustworthy partner in whatever this endeavor is. Like, I just think that's so cool. And I can't see myself ever going back to the consumer side. I'll look at this 10 years from now and laugh at myself. But right now it's like, I just think it's so interesting. In addition to the fact that we get to work in all these different businesses, it's like marketing and HR, right? Like you can work at any company, right? Because every company needs marketers, every company needs HR, and that's been a fun sort of component of my career, is just being able to jump around and work on all these different things,
Yeah. All right. So we've looked back, but now we're going to look forward, Steve. You're going to tell us the future of marketing. If you were to take a guess at something that wasn't, something that 8,000 other people have said, this is what's going to happen next year. What do you see as like something that we're just kind of, this does not work anymore, or this is a whole new path that's going to open up?
Yeah. I don't know. It probably is something that everybody's saying, but it just feels like everything's moving to be permission based, right? Like as a consumer, I have control over everything. I don't need commercials. I don't have to watch your pre-roll. I don't have to absorb this thing unless I choose to do that. And as a consumer, that excites me. As a marketer, that excites me. I think it has implications across channels and tactics and businesses, and it makes our job harder, but also more valuable. And I think, you've created a successful business for yourself on this idea of content, but it's like marketing organizations are becoming media organizations, right? Like our job is to create and make interesting things that people want to participate in and see. And like, that's not going to change, So I think this like blending of pop culture and media outlets and commercial interests, like all that stuff is evolving at such an interesting speed and pace. I certainly don't know how to predict where those things are going, but I think from a career standpoint, it's something that I certainly pay attention to. And I think if in your own career, you're not thinking about how you can create things of value, right, that people want to participate in, then you're not marketing, right? You're just trying to schlep your wares, and that's not going to go very far much longer because people aren't going to be forced to watch it.
I like it. Seth Godin would agree with you on the permission front. That's core to his DNA there. We'll have Seth on the show too at a future date. Seth and Neil. It'll be
get them both on the phone.
Of us will get together.
right over cocktails, right?
All right, I'm gonna get super tactical. So I'm gonna talk about like technology now. What's what's a one or two pieces of technology that is newer that you're kind of like, this tool just helps me out? Whether that saves me time or gives me new information. What do you like out there from a tools perspective?
Without naming names?
You can name names on this one. Just you have to disclose an affiliate partnership if you've got one.
No affiliation. I've recently been using Asana a lot as an organization. It's just a tool that I know it's been around for a little while, but as a project management tool, it's like any tool. It is what you make of it. But it's one of those like, how did we ever go without a tool like this to keep ourselves organized, and if you're working within a larger department with a lot more people, and even in a somewhat smaller department where you've got a lot of different sort of moving pieces or plates you're spinning, I think that type of sort of project management software can be super valuable. What's another piece of software that I've been using a lot of? Oh, I recently signed up. I got a Feedly account, which is an RSS tool that allows you to sort of, again, no affiliation, allows you to sort of categorize and bucket things, your personal news feed with your work news feed, or maybe an industry you're starting to pay attention to. And I've found that as like compared to like a Twitter as your home of the internet, like Feedly for me is becoming my home of the internet because it's a much more curated sort of article based feed. And I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've done Feedly. It does a nice job of that. I feel like I'm fishing when I'm going out to Feedly, meaning like I'm just setting a bunch of bobbers up on the lake, and then stuff will attract its way in, and it definitely like that. And I do like Asana too. I've used that for a little bit, and these tools for like project management that have collaboration and document sharing built into them, it just cracks me up because when I got started in marketing, it was like Microsoft Project. You either use that or you didn't have a plan. And the functionality of Microsoft Project was like you created rows and tasks and milestones, and that was it. And then like you all revisited this plan that some person took 2 weeks to create, and like
right.
But when you get into these platforms where there's just real-time collaboration, it's just like there's nothing more satisfying on a project when you're watching something in Asana like just happen and you're just watching it. You're not even like engaging in it. You're like, yes, these are the things that I should be seeing. I did see the asset, and email volumes tend to go down.
Yeah. Well, and especially with so many people working from home and these remote teams now, like those types of tools, it'll be fun to pay attention to how they build on that, right? You see tools like Zoom or Slack adding functionality, begging and borrowing, because all any of us want is less tools, right? I don't want more tools. I want less tools, right? I want more consolidation of things. I want everything to be in one spot. I don't want to have these 10 different things I'm using at any one time. So, how is Asana going to do Slack-like instant messaging, right? They've already got some like email type functionality within their tools so you can message around certain projects. But, when are they going to start doing video chat? Slack's got a really nice video chat feature now within their tool, where I don't need to launch Zoom. I can just do it right within Slack. That type of merger, sort of platform play for some of these organizations will be fun to watch.
I'm amazed at the Zoom and Otter integration. So Otter does, voice dictation translation into transcripts. You now just feed your Zoom meeting that's recorded into the transcript. And with Otter, for example, you and I could have this whole conversation, and you could say penguin, right? Like I remember him telling me the penguin story. I go into Otter. I type in the word penguin. It jumps down to the part of the meeting where you said penguin, and I just hit play. And you think about that, the ability within 10, 15 seconds to get in that precise of like, no, I remember you told me the penguin story, and there was something in there after that I needed. Right. And it's the efficiency of that kind of blows my mind.
I saw a company recently. They Instagrammed me. They literally, you can enter text and they have AI characters that will read that text and create like promotional videos for you, right? So you could do like a screen demo of your product and then have this talking head, and it's pretty good, right? Like it's a 90%. Like if you're really paying attention and looking for it, you can tell it's kind of an AI generated thing. But between that and all the AI generated artwork that's floating around nowadays, like it's gonna, I don't know. the hardest thing as a marketer is to not buy new tools, right? Like, how do I not get drawn to this like shiny thing, knowing that I'm going to use it for a few months and then it's going to disappear into my MarTech stack, never to be seen again,
Yep. And then you need an app to manage all that. So you'll buy the app too to manage all that.
Right. Another quick one is that the designers out there are going to be mad at me, but there are a lot of like design as a service companies now where as a small team, you can pay a flat monthly rate to some of these organizations that have on-staff designers, right? So you have your brand sort of in the software, you submit a project, 24 hours later, you get a nicely designed PowerPoint, right? Or a one-sheeter that your sales team needed, and it's wonderful for certain types of things. And when I was running a small team, it was invaluable to us because we didn't have agency support. So I could pay the, $500 or $1,000 a month for these guys to sort of always be on call for that type of stuff so that I didn't have to do didn't have to get into Illustrator and edit the document and that kind of thing. But I found a lot of value in those tools too.
All right, so we're gonna wrap it up. So I'm gonna end on one question, and you can choose the question. This is a choose your adventure question. Either tell us about the best piece of marketing you've ever seen, whether you were involved with it or someone marketed to you. That's question one. Question number two would be, what's the one thing that you see that is just a huge pet peeve where, you may have to throw away your iPhone and buy a new one because it's just like, I'm going to throw my phone at this thing if it happens again.
Oh man, that's a good one. I'll do the second one. I think prior to moving into B2B, I worked a little bit in the sort of event space, and some of that work involves working with celebrity personalities. And one thing that always scratches me tickles me the wrong way, I guess I'll say, is when brands align themselves or partner with a personality or a celebrity that has no earthly reason for existing. Like, why do you as a brand think that this person represents your brand other than name recognition? For some reason, that just always bothers me. Like this perceived value of celebrity versus the actual value of celebrity, especially for like B2B organizations where there's just no earthly reason for those two brands to coexist and to be supporting each other. I think there's so much success in the B2C world with personalities and aligning with those types of folks. I think the B2B world has some evolution and some growing to do in that space, and sort of intelligently aligning with personalities that have following, call them influencers, whatever you want to call them. But when that's done wrong, I think it can be really messy, and it just bothers me for whatever reason.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Steve, I enjoyed the conversation. It has been really good. I'm going to ask everyone to continue to like and subscribe, or if my kids are on the podcast with me, they would use much cooler language like smash that subscribe button. I keep on dropping that with them, and they're kind of like, Dad, dude, it's like, it's just not cool. Stop. And I kind of having that like proud dad moment where I'm embarrassing my kids by using their language. But anyway, thank you for joining me. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, Steve. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Interesting B2B Marketers podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you heard this podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's episode, please help grow the podcast by sharing with others and leaving a review. We'll see you next time.